All right, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today on December 18th for our first Parenting at Mealtime and Playtime education session of this fiscal year. This training is hosted by the Ohio chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics under the Parenting at Mealtime and Playtime program. In its 20th year of funding, Parenting at Mealtime and Playtime has provided evidence-based education to physicians, nurses, home visitors, community health workers, and beyond. This year, PMP will focus on adolescent health and supporting the providers that care for them. Next slide, please. Thank you so much to our funder, the Ohio Department of Health, for funding this education session and supporting the health and wellness of children in Ohio. The Ohio AAP is excited to continue the work of PMP and looks forward to diversifying its audience and topics. If you have any ideas for our toolkit, mobile app, or printable resources throughout today's session, please share your ideas in the chat or reach out to me, Sahabi, the PMP Program Manager. We always appreciate feedback from our learners. With that, today's training is hosted by Dr. Tiffany Ryback. Dr. Ryback is a pediatric psychologist and researcher that works with children and families to promote health and well-being. Dr. Ryback received her master's and PhD at the University of Memphis in Tennessee and completed her residency at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. In her clinical practice, she creates partnerships with families to identify their strengths, challenges, and goals collaboratively. She has no relevant financial relationships to disclose. Thank you, Dr. Ryback, for joining us today.
Thank you, Sahabi. It's great to be here with you all. So my talk is going to be focused on adolescent mental health and what we can do from a nutritional standpoint, physical activity standpoint, and kind of an embracing of this wonderful developmental phase that they're in. So my objectives for today are to explore the impact of nutrient-rich foods, physical activity, and social connection on mood regulation and stress response in adolescents, learn how to promote psychological flexibility and values-based decision-making around food, movement, and social connection, helping adolescents cultivate a healthy relationship with food and movement by enhancing self-awareness, promoting self-compassion, and aligning choices with their personal values, and learning practical strategies to empower adolescents in developing healthy habits by fostering autonomy, modeling values-driven behaviors, and utilizing effective communication techniques such as helping them navigate challenges. So when we think about adolescents, there's often a lot of angst around working with teens and adolescents, but they're actually one of my favorite group of people to work with because they have such a unique, they're in such a unique stage of life. So when I'm working with teen clients, I often enjoy asking them to draw a map of their brains, illustrating kind of the different areas that take up the most space or are priorities for them. And as you can see from this image here, teens like to draw things related to their activities that they find really fun. You can see a high rebellion center here. Social connections are, a very big part of their brain. And at the very bottom, you can see is like a tiny little thing about memory for chores and homework. And I just love how this is capturing what's so true of adolescents. They have so much going on and their interests don't always align with our interests for them as adults. And so sometimes they need kind of this supportive environment to be able to achieve some of these healthy goals that we have for them. So in terms of brain development, I think it's really important to look at what key areas are driving adolescent development and behavior. And so the prefrontal cortex is the area that's responsible for planning, decision-making, setting priorities, impulse control, such as like suppressing those impulses and weighing consequences of one's action. So this area is still developing and doesn't really fully develop until they're 25. And so I think that's really important to consider when you're working with teens. Oftentimes they act very grown up, they act mature, but we forget that they have this very large area of their brain that is still under development. And so we have to be mindful and support them in making good decisions. In contrast, the limbic system, which really governs emotions and reward seeking, this area of the brain is very highly active, which can lead to intense emotions and a preference for immediate rewards. And I think this is kind of the hallmark of what adolescence looks like for teens and adults working with teens. We often see big mood swings and impulsivity, and this can be driven by that limbic system, which is really highly active. So, it's also relevant to kind of look at how do these regions of the brain impact their behavior? And so the developmental factors at play here are that adolescents are going to take more risks. They're seeking social approval. They're responding more intensely to emotional experiences. And this really means that this period of time for teens is a period of vulnerability and for significant growth. And we also know the delayed maturation of the prefrontal cortex, combined with this high limbic activity, really can increase the susceptibility of mental health issues like anxiety and depression, especially if adolescents are in very stressful environments or maybe less supportive environments. So let's take a look at some data from the Ohio Youth Risk Behavior Survey. This survey is a nationwide surveying effort that's conducted every 2 years with middle school and high school students. And so it's really the only reliable source of state level data that we have around adolescent health behavior. It's a wonderful resource to kind of understand the state level impacts of mental health and health behaviors for our teens. So if you haven't checked out this website yet, I highly recommend it. So adolescents were asked in the most recent survey about their mental health in a couple different ways. This first graph captures adolescents who indicated that their mental health was most of the time or always not good. And it's split here by male, female, grade level, and race and ethnicity. So as you can see, for middle school students, many of them, a significant proportion of them were indicating that their mental health were not good, which is in alignment with what we know for the mental health crisis occurring across the country. This next one is an indicator of high school students. And so this, as you can see, middle school rates of teens who are indicating their mental health was not good were pretty high, but for teenagers, we see that it's even higher. And so we know that concerns continue to persist into high school and elevate for some kids as well. And then these graphs indicate for teens who feel sad or hopeless in high school. And it's even higher than kind of that global mental health. And so this is a real risk factor for suicidality and depression. And so we always want to pay attention to when kids are talking about feeling sad or hopeless and try to intervene early. And similarly, middle schoolers had a similar rate around that 33.5%, indicating feeling sad and hopeless. So this was consistent across middle school and high school. So let's take a look at what contributes to adolescent mental health. And what are some of those protective factors as well as risk factors? So we know adolescents face pressures from multiple sources. They have high academic expectations. They're navigating peer relationships and this new, or maybe not so new anymore, social media landscape. There's a lot of negative self-comparisons happening, especially online. And there's really this drive for peer acceptance during this developmental period. And without that peer acceptance, we can really see elevations of stress and impacts on self-esteem. So protective factors include strong support networks, including family and peers, that play a critical role in fostering resilience. We know positive self-perception and participation in regular physical activity and consuming nutritious diets can also buffer against stress and support mental well-being. And pediatricians and mental health professionals play a really significant role in reinforcing some of these protective factors by encouraging adolescents to build these supportive social networks, find hobbies that are meaningful to them and also can foster some resilience, and to encourage the creation of healthy routines that include balanced meals and regular exercise. So one study looked at developmental changes in protective factors and how these changed across time. And so the study was really fascinating. They looked at across the middle school and high school transition and measured it in 2 different periods. And they found that there's a sharp decline in protective factors when they entered middle school, but a turning point occurred with the transition to high school, where they saw more protective factors come into play. And the rationale for this is that as teens are kind of making this transition to high school, they're finding what's meaningful to them, what's important. They're kind of coming into their self-identity and more of these protective factors. They're finding their peers that they get along well with come into play a little bit more. There were some gender differences found. Females generally had higher protective factors in the individual, peer, and school domains, and males benefited more from preventative interventions targeting prosocial and refusal skills. So in particular, females generally benefited more from prosocial opportunities and involvement, but they were also less recognized in their efforts than males, suggesting that for females, maybe more recognition of the things they're doing well could support and be a protective factor for them as well. So there's lots of opportunity here and learnings that prevention programs should really focus on those middle school years as a time where these protective factors are declining. And we need kind of the special attention for enhancing recognition for females, and males need kind of some more support in engaging in prosocial behaviors. All right, so during adolescence, the brain's neural networks related to self-perception and self-concept are growing significantly. This creates really a prime period of time for identity exploration, where teens can start to better define who they are and what they value. They are often more introspective, examining their own beliefs, their personal interests, and what they want to do with their lives. What are their career ambitions? And this means that sometimes they can start to depart even from their own parents' beliefs and values a bit too, which is where we often see some tension between those parents and teens in interactions. And we know that these can be a little bit more challenging or heightened as they have kind of different goals and values during this period of time. I think autonomy and motivation is something that we can really embrace during this adolescent period. So as adolescents begin to develop this sense of autonomy, it's in part due to these maturing brain regions that support future planning and personal goal setting. And this is a real strength that we want to cultivate and foster. This opens a window for promoting healthy lifestyle changes or choices as they become more receptive around making their own decisions and deciding what values and long-term health goals they set for themselves. As we know, friends and peers are so important during this age, and adolescents' brains are really wired for social connection. There are increased activity in brain regions related to rewarding this social processing and social connection. So that makes peer relationships incredibly influential. as teens are motivated to seek out more acceptance and approval from their social circles, though this sometimes can lead to more engagement in risky behavior. So it also offers an opportunity to encourage positive group activities like team sports or attending social events that really kind of promote healthy lifestyle behaviors, good choices, activities that foster connection without the use of substances or other types of risky behavior. So by participating in group sports or health-focused clubs, adolescents can develop healthy habits supported by their peers. And pediatricians and parents can foster this by helping teens choose activities that align both with their personal goals, but also their social networks, promoting a lifestyle that supports the physical and mental well-being too. And then when we think about family factors, such as resources and parenting, these really shape those early healthy lifestyles. And all that we are doing early on can help shape the landscape for which teens are viewing these healthy behaviors. So just because teens have a lot of autonomy and their own motivations, the things that we do in the early years to set the stage and the foundation as parents for these kids can really impact how they look at these behaviors long term. So results from studies show that development and context really drive any changes that are occurring for adolescents in terms of their healthy lifestyle choices. And even though family factors kind of decrease in the influence with age, and peer influences start to have more of a role, that the early foundation is still really critical for shaping some of these values around health behaviors. The Ohio Youth Surveys also did a nice job evaluating adolescents' engagement in health behaviors. And as you can see from these slides, we have quite a bit of room for improvement here. So about 16% of adolescents in middle school said that they ate breakfast. 24% of high school students said that they do not eat breakfast. Sorry. So definitely some room for improvement there. We know that breakfast is one of the most important meals of the day to kind of jumpstart their nutrition, get their brains primed and ready to learn in school. So definitely an opportunity there to encourage teens to start their day well. And then in terms of adolescents who eat vegetables, of about 50%, a little bit over 50% are endorsing eating vegetables at least one time a day. So we're off to a good start there. But in terms of getting multiple servings of vegetables, we are seeing that that number really decline. So 2 or more times per day was endorsed around 25% for middle school, 27% for high school students, and 3 or more times per day, only 16% of middle school students and 15% for high school students. Adolescents who do not eat fruit, this was a little bit of smaller, so 16% of middle school students said that they do not eat any fruit, and 15% of high school students said that they do not eat any fruit. So a little bit of room for improvement there. And adolescents who are physically active for 60 minutes, 5 or more days a week, this is in line with the AP recommendations for physical activity. Only 47% of middle school students say they're meeting this guideline, and 44% of high schoolers are meeting this guideline. And we know with the use of social media and technology that teens are just a lot less active. They are in their rooms a lot more or in front of the TV on the couch. And so there's opportunity here to really encourage more physical movement throughout their day. So nutrition is an exciting thing to talk about because we know that it actually can really impact mood regulation and stress adaptation to stress. And it's really critical for these growing brains. So as they're experiencing this rapid brain development, making nutrition part of this discussion with teens is really vital. We know that their brains are consuming a significant portion of daily energy and nutrients to support their cognitive tasks like learning and emotion regulation. So starting the discussions there with them about what they're choosing to put in their body and how their brains, where they are and how they're developing these key nutrients and minerals are really important to support them in this process. So we want to focus on a nutrient-dense diet with adequate omega-3s, phytonutrients, and protein, especially essential for mental health and academic success. And avoiding processed foods that ensures like essential nutrients are not displaced from their diets. Again, this is an opportunity here where we could set them up really well in life by encouraging these healthy eating habits now so that they become habits and part of their life long term. And studies also show that nutrient-rich foods high in omega-3, fatty acids, B vitamins, and antioxidants can also support mood stability, reduce stress, and improve emotional regulation. So foods like leafy greens, salmon, nuts, and seeds are all linked to lower rates of depressive symptoms and improved stress response. So how bad is screen time? And fortunately, we have some studies to demonstrate screen time impacts and extracurricular impacts on adolescent mental health. This study in particular analyzed 28,712 seventh graders using a middle school years development instrument between 2014 and 2018. It explored after-school behaviors and mental health indicators such as life satisfaction, optimism, anxiety, and depression. And we found that adolescents engaging in extracurricular activities reported better mental health and were less likely to exceed the 2 hours a day of recreational screen time. For those who did exceed the 2 hours a day of screen time, girls showed greater vulnerability and adverse effects. And these findings highlight the importance of really balancing screen time with structured after-school activities to support adolescent overall well-being. So other key findings, extracurricular activities were linked to higher optimism and life satisfaction and associated with lower anxiety and depressive symptoms. And then again, we saw some of these gender differences in the negative effects of screen times for girls over boys. So promoting these extracurricular activities are important, but I think we have to find activities that are really meaningful and important to our teens, or it won't have quite the same impact as we're hoping to have. And then hopefully not surprising, we know that physical activity is very protective for mental health in teenagers. In particular, it's shown to improve mood, reduce anxiety, and really build resilience against stress. It enhances this endorphin and serotonin production, which we know are crucial for mood regulation. It also supports this healthy stress response by improving the body's ability to manage these daily stressors and promote more relaxation, and can also enhance sleep quality, which we know is very critical for overall mental health. Research also shows that physically active adolescents report lower rates of depression and anxiety and demonstrate overall better emotional well-being. But physical activities can vary. And so there's lots of different ways we can engage in physical activity, whether it be walking or engaging in cardiovascular exercises like running, cycling, but it can also include more mindful activities such as Tai Chi or yoga, and to still have those significant impacts on stress and anxiety levels. So how do we get our teens to make healthy choices? I think this is the elephant in the room when they are so kind of autonomous and motivated by their peers. So I think the first big thing we want to do is to really start to cultivate the self-awareness in teens around their activities. Help them by asking them how these different activities make them feel. Help them start to reflect on when they're eating the pizza and the burgers and French fries, what's their energy levels like? Do they feel really energized after, or do they want to take a nap? Help them start to kind of notice any emotional responses in response to activities that they're doing or foods that they're eating. Do they find that their like emotions are a little bit more up and down when they eat certain types of foods? Do they find a little bit more emotion stability when they're engaged in more of these physical activities or time with friends? Self-awareness here means not just understanding what's good for me. I think a lot of teens can understand that there are things that they should be doing, but really switching this mindset to what feels best for me, so that they can really start to build this personal connection to these health habits. So sometimes I'll have my teens kind of keep a log for a very short period of time, keeping track of their mood, their energy levels, their overall kind of feelings of optimism or quality of life in response to different activities that they're doing or meals that they're eating. I also like them to keep track of sleep as well, and what they think of how they think sleep is impacting their mental health too. And there's lots of apps. We know that teens can be on their phone quite a bit. So there's lots of apps that can support this tracking too. We also have to balance healthy lifestyle goals too, because we know that teens are often hard on themselves and there can be a lot of societal pressures on body image and fitness. And so when we're encouraging our adolescents to make health goals, we want to make it about kind of long-term healthy approach to living, but in a balanced way. We still want to enjoy the treats every once in a while. We still want to enjoy our time with friends, and engaging with friends online, but thinking kind of about the whole picture and how we can have this really balanced approach to living. And part of that comes with cultivating this mindset of kindness and not criticism towards themselves. Encouraging teens to really treat themselves as they would a friend who's learning something new, especially when they seem to be struggling with these goals that they set for themselves. And this mindset can really make it easier to keep going after setbacks and maintain that motivation. Because if we are very critical of ourselves, we're going to want to give up after the first time that we feel like we're not hitting that key goal. So it's really important to have a self-compassion mindset. And progress is what we're aiming for, not perfection. And that's really the key to these lasting habits. All right, so when I'm working with teens, I will often do some sort of values-based decision activity to kind of understand what are the things that are truly important to them. We know that adolescents are often motivated by what personally matters to them. And so by exploring their values, they can make choices that reflect what they genuinely care about, like feeling connected or having more energy. Value-based decision-making really empowers adolescents to make choices that are aligned with what they deeply care about, rather than responding to these short-term urges or impulses or even peer pressure. So we can help by asking questions to encourage teens to reflect, such as, what does a healthy lifestyle mean to me? How do my actions align with my long-term goals? And that really helps create a bridge of what their values are and also their everyday choices. Values-based decision-making helps teens see the longer-term impact of their choices on their overall identity. How do they want to be seen when they think of themselves 5 years down the road? With the new invention of AI, there's this fun kind of prompt that you can put into ChatGPT where you can say, describe the person I want to be in 5 years, and then give me the plan to get there. And so teens love to do that because they're all about thinking about the future and who they're going to become. And so as you start to think about how to shape how they're shaping their identity, you might offer that as one way for them to think about what are the actions that they want to align with their values at this stage of life. See, there's an approach that we take in psychology that's called this DNAV model. And at the core of this DNAV model, we ask our teens to really identify what their core values are to really serve as a guidepost for their consistent choices, even when they're faced with temptations and challenges. And sometimes I'll do like a card sort activity where they can look at all the different types of values that exist and identify some of the top 10 for them that they're going to use as these guideposts. Sometimes that could be like being a good friend, having energy to do the activities I want. Those types of values can definitely be connected to their choices around food, movement, and how they're navigating their peer relationships. Let's see. So if we know that teens value energy and confidence, they may make food choices that support that sustained energy rather than instant gratification of a piece of cupcake. And teaching teens to really tune into these values, we can really help them take more ownership over their decisions, building these longer term habits. So social connection, we know, is a major driver for teen behavior, and it's crucial that we're not sacrificing health values for peer approval, which can be really challenging thing for teens to navigate, especially if they're surrounded by peers making less healthy choices. We know social connections are really critical as they can help shape teens' self-concept and reinforce important skills like empathy, communication, and self-regulation, as well as healthy behaviors. So reinforcing their autonomy, we definitely want to emphasize this autonomy so that they can make choices that are aligned with their health goals, even when others may not be. And I think focusing here on you're your own person and you have your own values. And even if your friends are making less healthy choices, we can choose to do the things that matter to us because your values matter in these situations too. This level of psychological flexibility, we call it, can be really especially helpful in managing social pressures, and figuring out how they can make mindful decisions in these moments where peer pressure exists. So again, if they're at a party and they're surrounded by all this tempting food and there's only a few healthy choices and everybody else around them is eating the less healthy choices, maybe that value of sustained energy or feeling good about myself can help them make a different choice in what they're eating, or maybe they're eating a balance of those foods. And we want to really focus on practicing open-mindedness and acceptance here to navigate these complex social dynamics, as well as, any major disagreements that might come up without taking on some unhelpful stress. We know that autonomy really builds confidence in teens. And so allowing them to make some decisions about their health within a very structured and supportive framework can really help lead to more consistent choices and healthier habits. This can be hard to kind of let go of some of that control for parents. And so we have to do it in a way that feels sustainable and supportive, by giving them choices. Maybe they don't have complete free reign, but maybe they're allowed to kind of suggest ideas for activities or meals, and support them in those decisions. Parents can really guide by, again, providing choices rather than giving directives. And we know that when parents are directing, teens are often rolling their eyes, or it goes in one ear, out the other ear. So if we're giving teens more of the choice, we often find that we're able to engage them a little bit better in these healthy behaviors and activities. Again, and this ability to have some autonomy and say can really foster this responsibility, and aligning what their personal values are with their choices. So psychological flexibility I mentioned before is about not getting stuck in rigid thought patterns, allowing adolescents to see thoughts as background noise rather than unchangeable truths. For example, when teens think, I'm not good enough at sports, we can encourage them to notice and accept that thought, but also let it pass rather than dictating their behavior. We know that we all have these inner critics, who can say some pretty hurtful things, but if we're recognizing this inner critic for what it is, as thoughts that are less helpful or not truthful, we can let it kind of pass on by without giving a lot of attention to it, and without letting it dictate our behaviors. And I think that's the most important thing to teach teens, is when you're having that thought, is that helping you, or is it kind of demotivating you to make those healthy choices? If it's not helping you, then why are we giving so much attention or thought to it? This is a hard skill to learn, and it takes a lot of practice. But sometimes giving a voice to that inner critic, and saying, oh, that's just my inner critic, or that's just kind of giving a funny name to it, can help teens kind of separate those thoughts, so that they're not as strong, and in guiding their behaviors. So teaching the skill can help really enable healthy choices that are value driven, instead of purely reactionary. And the practice of unhooking from this critical self-talk, helps adolescents kind of practice viewing thoughts more objectively. Instead of immediately reacting or responding to that first thought, they learn to observe and consider what really aligns with their goals and values. This can be especially helpful in emotionally reactive situations as well. And lastly, we really want to empower our teens to build these healthy habits long term. And empowering means we're really supporting their autonomy. They are their own person. And it's an exciting period of time while they're starting to explore their self-identity and what matters to them. And sometimes we have to, offer a little bit more free reign for them to explore what's most important to them. So one of the most effective ways to encourage this is to foster more autonomy in their everyday choices. This can look like selecting what types of meals they're having, or their preferred type of physical activity, or what they're doing for their extracurricular activities after school, based on what they feel are their strengths, or based off their own motivations. But we also know modeling these behaviors is also very critical. When caregivers demonstrate healthy eating, regular activity, and effective stress management, adolescents are more likely to adopt these habits as part of their lifestyle. If nobody in their circle is really modeling these behaviors, they're less likely to try them out for themselves. So this is critical. We also know open communication can really strengthen this approach. And having an opportunity to discuss challenges for caregivers to talk about what's challenging for them when they're making these healthy choices, and setting goals collaboratively can really help teens in making good choices here too. And then I think it's really important in these discussions that when parents are having them or pediatricians are having them, is you're really working on guiding the teen, but not necessarily imposing these rules or these limitations, because that can feel very stifling for teens. And so when you can encourage change talk, where they are really the ones talking about why it's important to change, we know that they're more likely to actually engage in those behaviors versus if you're giving more of a directive, like you need to do this because it will improve your health. They're less likely to act on those types of things if it's not feeling like it's coming from them and it's their choice in the matter. And there's lots of different ways to be healthy. So it doesn't have to be what we think is the only way to be healthy. There's lots of creative ways that teens can get more vegetables and fruits in, healthy fats. There's lots of ways that they can get movement in throughout their day. And so it's fun to be able to collaboratively brainstorm with teens around this. And then of course, there's going to be these opportunities to discuss when we hit roadblocks or setbacks towards these goals. And it's really critical to support teens in viewing these challenges as opportunities to learn and grow and build this resilience. And exploring these conversations and setbacks together can really help teens see that there's lots of opportunities to grow when they face these hard times and difficult challenges. All right, and then these are my references, and we have plenty of time for questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ryback. If anyone has any questions, we'd love to welcome them now. You can either unmute and ask or put them in the chat. I'll just give it a little bit longer for questions. All right, we have one in the chat. Could you speak on how to discuss substances such as nicotine and alcohol with adolescents?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I like to kind of understand the motivation for trying those substances if adolescents are already engaging in them, and understand kind of what is the driver behind those behaviors so that I can help adolescents figure out if those like engaging and using those substances really align with those long-term goals they have for themselves um, and their values. And generally, when I start to explore how those things are impacting their time with friends or impacting their overall energy and um, feelings of energy, they often will say that it's not as helpful. And so we can start to explore how they navigate those peer situations with their friends when those substances come into play, which is often what happens. Um, and so if they are still feeling like it's something that they want to engage in, sometimes also giving data around how often teens their age are engaging in substances. Oftentimes, a lot of teens feel like everybody's doing it, so I should do it too. And then when you can provide data that like less than 5% of teens are actually using nicotine and alcohol, teens are like, oh, wow, maybe I should not be doing this. This is not actually in alignment with what other peers are doing. So sometimes a little bit of that peer data can be useful. I see another question about giving suggestions on how to work collaboratively with teens to reduce their screen time. I love this question. Yeah, I think this is excellent for another opportunity to really look at what's most important to you. What are you getting out of the screen time that you're doing? Do you feel like it's a source of connection truly with friends? And is there a way we could take that connection offline and more in person? And an opportunity to reflect when you're with your friends and you're actually hanging out. How does that feel tangibly different than when you're just online chatting or Snapchatting your friends? And most teens will say that when they're actually working, well, actually in person with their friends, they get so much more of that, those feel good emotions, that dopamine and serotonin, and they just feel like more connected and genuinely and authentically connected with their friends and able to have more fun than just chatting over different apps and things. So I think that's an opportunity for sure. And then sometimes we have to kind of set limits and rules, and we know that technology can be pretty addictive. And if teens are not able to make those healthy choices for themselves, then sometimes we have to, as adults, kind of set more firmer limits for them and help them make those healthy choices by shutting down their access to apps after a certain allotted time. Let's see, other resources, ideas to help the most vulnerable teenagers overcome unsafe neighborhoods, the free and not so great breakfast, lunch, and school meals, and overcome social determinants of health. Yeah, those are really big challenges that a lot of the families I work with in pediatric primary care face. And I think there's a couple of different opportunities in terms of navigating unsafe neighborhoods. If they don't feel like their neighborhood is safe to kind of do activities or get out. And there's a lot of community centers or different kind of after school activities that are available for teens. And so helping them think through what activities could help them kind of be in a safe environment, be around people with shared goals and interests, certainly. And then the free and not so great breakfast and lunch and school meals are definitely challenging. So talking with teens about what healthy choices look like within those meals, and brainstorming with families what sustainable, healthy meals can be on their affordable budget. And so and what resources do they have access to in terms of benefits such as SNAP or WIC that can support some of these healthier options for them. And certainly can they leverage some of the great organizations in the community that are helping get food or improve food access, especially for healthier options such as fresh produce and things. I would highly encourage just to connect with your community and understand what resources are available to your families and see if you can partner with some of we work with social workers all the time who are excellent at connecting our families, our community health workers who are excellent at connecting our families to the different resources that exist. And then are preteens not learning how to resolve conflict among their peers? Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think there's a lot we can do to support teens in learning how to resolve conflicts and how to navigate these differences of opinions or differences around different situations where peers might have different ideas for how to react and respond. And I think with the online engagement, sometimes we're learning that teens sometimes feel like they can say things that are very hurtful and not have any consequences for them. And so I think there's definitely an opportunity here to teach teens to work to recognize and acknowledge when conflicts arise with their friends and how to navigate those conflicts in healthy ways. And the best way to do that is to model that as adults and parents with teens and help them kind of problem solve as they're navigating conflicts with their friends. And to do that, we have to know what's happening with our peers. So keeping communication open with our teens and asking them about their friends, asking them how they're navigating these situations opens a lot of doors for us to offer support in navigating conflict.
Thank
Great
you,
question.
Dr. Ryback. Any other questions? Okay, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you so much, Dr. Ryback, for facilitating such a great training, and thank you all for coming. On the next slide, you'll see information on how to claim your CME or MOC credit. So please go ahead and check your email. We ask that all participants complete this short survey, even if you do not plan to claim credit. This will enable us to collect endpoint data to measure the rigor of our programming. Once you complete the survey, you will receive a certificate within 10 days, and I will follow up with these directions via email for your reference. Next slide, please. Our next Ohio AAP Parenting at Mealtime and Playtime Education is on January 29th at noon. We'll be hearing from Dr. Kristen Stackpole of Cincinnati Children's on good habits for adolescents sleep. And so you can scan that QR code there to register, and it'll also be in the email that I'm going to follow up with in just a few minutes. Next slide, please. If you have any questions or suggestions for future PMP programming, please call or email me at the contact information listed here. This concludes today's training session. Thank you for your time and energy, and I hope to see you in another Ohio AAP training in the future. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.